Hello, and thank you for tuning into this video. I angled the camera up a little bit so that you can see how my sweetheart Oreo is leaning against my sketchbook as her little kitty pillow while I film this. It's funny, I can't turn on the camera until both of my cats are settled, because if I start a video and they're just randomly out walking around in my apartment somewhere, it's inevitable that when I hit record and start talking, one of them is going to jump up onto my sketchbook, scatter all the jewelry I have laid out here, or you know, start doing that thing where they need you with their claws on my book. So it's funny, but she's just looking so cute. I had to share how adorable that is. So if you saw the thumbnail or the title of this video, you already know that I'm going to get to some drawing in a little bit, but that I wanted to start by talking about talismans. And that's why I've got some of my favorite jewelry pieces arranged here, some of my newest designs. I've been brainstorming for a few months now an idea for a new playlist of videos I'd like to film where I interview people who are jewelry makers, jewelry lovers, and especially people who are interested in spiritual and mystical jewelry. It is my personal passion, as you well know if you've seen videos of mine before this one. And like, I'm such a jewelry nerd that whatever I'm doing, my mind is always on some level thinking of the jewelry angle. What I mean is, like, if I'm going for a walk to deliver some of my Etsy sales at the post office, if I see beautiful colors in the sky at sunset, my mind goes to opals. If I'm on a road trip into the mountains, I'm not just admiring the wildflowers and the rocks on the side of the road. I'm thinking of, how can I design a piece of jewelry that evokes this feeling of being in nature? And especially if I'm watching something, if I'm watching a TV show or a movie, my mind is less focused on the character development and the story and the dialogue. Like, I zoom in on the jewelry to a point that it's distracting. And I've watched certain shows just because the jewelry got me. And one example is Schitt's Creek, one of my all-time favorite sitcoms. Like, if you haven't watched Schitt's Creek yet, like, watch it. It's amazing. I remember I was home in Canada renewing my visa while I was still a part of that cult in India that I'm not going to name or get into too much here. But I was back home renewing my visa, and my mom told me, like, you've got to watch this show called Schitt's Creek when it comes on. And I was a little like, nah, I'm only back for like a month in Canada, so I want to go for walks, I want to draw, I want to make jewelry, I want to enjoy my freedom. Because if you're familiar at all with how cults operate, your schedule is planned for you 24/7. You have no moment to just do you. You've got to always do what the cult leader wants to be you. But anyway, my mom convinced me to give this show a chance. And the moment, like, the opening started and I saw what the character Moira was wearing, I, like, zeroed in on that TV screen and couldn't even think about anything else. She had the most fabulous statement necklace I'd ever seen. And Alexis's character with all of her long layers and her hippie style and just the minimalist jewelry juxtaposed against Moira's maximalist jewelry, it got me. They had me at the jewelry. But anyway, I've been thinking of starting a playlist on this channel, and let me know in the comments if this would interest you at all. I'm probably gonna do it whether people are interested in it or not, because, you know, I want to, and that's the joy of having your own channel, is that you get to do what you want to do. But I would love to know if it interests others, and maybe get some feedback about how you'd like to see it presented and who you might like to see featured. But what I've been thinking of doing is a series that I'd like to call Talisman Talks, where I interview jewelry designers who inspire me, people who are jewelry collectors who can share their objects of, share their favorite pieces, whether it's prayer beads or statement necklaces or layering pieces or a charm bracelet with souvenirs they've collected from all the places they've visited. I am pretty much a jewelry nerd who is obsessed with what I do. The pieces I make, my goal is always that whoever buys a piece of jewelry from my Etsy shop, it should be, if not their favorite piece, at least one of their favorite pieces. And if you've ever bought something from my shop, you know that I always include a little handwritten thank you note and a free gift with purchase. And that's because I love to share the wealth. Like, I feel so blessed to be surrounded by beads and books about jewelry and pieces that I'm working on. Like, to me, I feel like I've achieved the highest success in life. Now, that doesn't mean I've got next month's rent in advance. Like, I'm still living like everybody else, working for my rent and for my groceries, and I couldn't call myself wealthy. It's not like I'm a homeowner or anything. But I feel like I've achieved the highest success a person can achieve if that person is creatively driven the way I am, which is that I get to do for a living what I love doing most. I may not be able to hop a jet to a tropical destination whenever I feel like it, but I get to set my own schedule, choose what time of day I'm going to walk to the post office to send my orders based on when there's going to be shade and the prettiest light in the sky, and, parlay that walk to the post office into a walk around the neighborhood or to the park. So I feel like my customers who buy stuff from my shop are giving me the gift of business, allowing me, supporting me in doing what I love to do most. So in return, I love to give them a gift. And that's why there's the free gift with every purchase. Gosh, leave it to me to take like a 2-second concept and drone on for 2 minutes explaining it. But I mean, this is my visual podcast basically, where I talk and talk and talk and allow myself the indulgence of going on and being very verbose in my approach to whatever topic is given. Anyway, back to the subject of that new playlist. I'm thinking of interviewing, like I said, jewelry designers who inspire me. Another show I watched that after the first episode I knew I had to binge it just because of the jewelry is Grace and Frankie. Now, I don't have Netflix anymore. I'm probably going to have to just bite the bullet and subscribe to it again so I can watch the newer season. But oh my god, like the jewelry worn by Frankie's character, it is just over the top, fun, playful, crazy gorgeous. And like, I was so obsessed with it that I did some Googling to find out who designs it. And I found 2 designers. I forget their names right now because I'm bad with names, but I can picture what they look like. One is this crazy cool, I think of her as like the jewelry designer version of my Auntie Marilyn, because my Auntie Marilyn has short hair with bright colors and always wears really cool, unique pieces of clothing that she finds on Etsy. And this designer who does the jewelry for Grace and Frankie is similarly of the pixie cut persuasion with funky colors in her do, and always wears clothing the same style as my Auntie Marilyn wears. So I think of her as being like an alternate reality version of my auntie, who's making just eccentric and stunning works of art that are wearable in the form of jewelry. And the other girl, she's a younger lady who does the kind of jewelry you'd expect to see at like a cool festival. Like you'd expect to see her pieces on people at Shambhala. Is that still a thing? I'm kind of old, guys. Like when I was a teenager, there was this festival in the mountains in the Canadian Rockies called Shambhala, and it was kind of like a Canadian version of, I don't know, maybe like Burning Man, but with less booths. It was just like a big outdoor mountain rave. You'd expect to see this girl's jewelry at a place like that. It's gigantic crystals, something I also love to incorporate in jewelry, like this talisman here. But yeah, she does really over the top, big statement pieces, which I love. So I've been thinking it would be amazing if I could get jewelry designers like those two on like a Zoom interview where I can ask them about what inspired them to get into jewelry design and how they feel their art enhances the lives of the people who wear it. Because I really think people who are passionate about jewelry design, they're not making pieces just to make money. They're making pieces to brighten a person's day, like to make a statement about who you are and what your life means when you wear it. I think this is the big problem I have with places like Claire's Accessories and Ardene's and like the earring rack at Shoppers Drug Mart. It's that when jewelry is mass produced, it might look pretty, but there's no soul to it. There's no hand of the artist felt in the final work. It's just somebody picked a design that they knew is popular at the given moment, mass produced it in a factory, packaged it, marketed it, and then everybody has the same earrings and everybody has the same bracelet. And yeah, to me that's just such a generic, expressionless way of adorning yourself. And I mean, I mentioned this in a previous video and somebody commented that there's no problem with people buying stuff they like that's mass produced like that. And my goodness, don't get me wrong, it's not like I have a moral antagonism towards the people who buy jewelry from mass-produced consumer sources. Like, you do you guys. Like, if you love Claire's Accessories, please don't comment on this saying like, why are you hating on Claire's? That shit's the bomb. Like, I get it. You like, get what you like. But for me personally, I just love the story behind a piece. It's kind of like, did you ever watch Friends? You know, there's that episode where Phoebe and Rachel are roommates and Rachel buys a Pottery Barn chest of drawers and Phoebe is super against the mass-produced genericism of Pottery Barn. So Rachel tells her it's like a vintage apothecary table. My feeling is kind of like that. Like, the pieces that I love to collect are pieces that have a story to them. That, you know, if somebody asks, where did you get that? I'd rather be able to talk about an artisan market in India where I bought the beads and it was craftsmen who made them. I'm talking specifically about these beads. I should say these ones here that are in this necklace. I ordered those from a shop in South India that predominantly they sell deity pieces like temple jewelry. You've seen me wear it in previous videos if you're a regular here. But what's really amazing is that in that shop, I think it's called Jewels Mart, or Jewel Smart. I always get it wrong, but they reproduce vintage and antique Indian temple jewelry, making it with gold plating instead of solid gold so that it's accessible to everyone. And in their description, it's the amount of jobs created for artisans who are using the same lost wax casting methods that were used by their ancestors. It's a way to keep these people employed, doing what they love, you know, continuing the family tradition, even in a market where people are no longer commissioning, thousands and thousands of dollars worth of heavy gold jewelry. The wealth of India in centuries and millenniums gone by was such that a family could own their wealth in the form of gold. Like the way we have RRSPs and savings bonds preparing for our future, their investments would be heavy gold bangles and belts and necklaces. As the price of gold increases and whatever, I don't need to get into the economics. Just let's leave it at, if somebody says, wow, those are pretty gold beads, I'd rather be able to say an artisan from South India crafted these in the tradition passed down from, centuries of goldsmiths and jewelers, than just say, oh, really? You like those beads? I got them at Michael's. And again, I don't mean to throw shade on Michael's or people who use that kind of stuff, because I don't want to be a snob about this. Man, like the political correct culture makes me think about every single word I say as I say it, because I don't want to imply that if something doesn't have a pedigree to it or a history to it or a story to it, that it's bad or dumb or stupid or a waste of money. I just mean to say, I am a fangirl for the history of jewelry. And for me personally, talking to designers who have created a unique style is something I'd like to start doing. So what do you think? Would you be interested? Another jewelry artist I want to get into an interview is, I think her name is Brix. I forget her last name, but she is Giorgio Tsoukalos's wife. And if you are an Ancient Aliens nerd fangirl like me, you know that Giorgio Tsoukalos, he is the brilliant man behind the meme. You've probably seen these memes of him with his crazy wild big hair, and it says, I'm not saying it was aliens, but it was aliens. He's that guy. And when I watch Ancient Aliens, I find myself distracted by the amazing statement necklaces he wears. They've got these big, bulbous, or organic looking glass works as the pendants. I don't even want to call them glass beads or glass pendants. They are glass works. Like, they are the kind of ginormous statement jewels that I'm all about. And like the beaded necklaces that lead down to these glass works, I can always kind of spot like, whoa, that's a raw amethyst crystal, or that looks like shungite. It's not just random beads leading to glass. Like, they are talisman pieces, beautifully made. And I've tried Googling in the past Giorgio Tsoukalos jewelry, and it always leads me to the pin that he has, that I think he sells on his website, it's a reproduction of that little golden bird figurine that's ancient. I think it was found in an Egyptian tomb, or maybe in a South American desert. I think there are two of these. One was Egyptian, one was South American. But anyway, it's like, it looks like a little paper airplane made of gold. And the scientists who have studied it describe that it is not just a bird that some ancient goldsmith made into a toy. It's very clearly designed for flight. Like, it's designed as a craft, not as a bird. In any case, I've never been able to find who makes Giorgio's necklaces. And there's also an interview he did with Joe Rogan. And in that interview, he's got a stack of semi-precious stone bracelets on his wrist. And I was looking at that thinking, okay, like, dude, you have to mention crystal healing at some point in this interview. Like, I see that bracelet stack. That's not a fashion choice. Like, there's more energy to it than just the look of all of those stones. But it didn't come up. And of course it didn't come up because it's Joe Rogan. It's not a girl who's interested in jewelry interviewing him. It's another dude who's interested in his theories interviewing him. Anyhow, last night I had this, you know, sometimes you search for something and it's like a half interest. You're kind of curious, you search it, you can't find it, you move on. That's how I've looked up Giorgio's necklaces in the past. Last night, I wasn't going to give up until I find out who is making these things. And finally, I came across a tweet of Giorgio's from 2012. And in that tweet, he said, people always ask me where I get my jewelry. I buy it from the lovely and talented, I want to say like Bricks Bingley or Busby, or I forget the last name. Don't hate me. But I clicked on that link and it led to an Etsy shop with a few little glass pieces. And when I read the artist's bio, it all clicked together. Of course, she's Giorgio's wife making this stuff. But she had really reasonably priced pieces. You know, earrings shaped like alien faces and big glass paperweights that she does using the lampwork glass method. And my favorite style of hers is where she reproduces what look like galaxies encased in glasswork and calls them the universe pieces. So I would love to interview Bricks about what led her into it, because she wrote a bit of a bio on her Etsy shop, describing the first time she ever saw lampwork glass beads and fell in love with glasswork at an exhibit she visited, but that she could never have actually imagined that she herself could make something like that until she took a course in lampwork glass methods. And I just love that kind of backstory behind a person's creative passion, where first you fall in love with something and then you become that something. Like first you fall in love with beading and then you learn to bead and you're making your own bead stuff. Or you fall in love with glass and then you learn the method and you become the glass maker. To me, that is just so inspiring. And she also described in her bio that every piece that she makes is charged under the moon and in the sunlight, and it's Reiki infused. That finally brought into perspective why I always find myself so obsessed with Giorgio's necklaces. It's that for sure they're made with the intention of being talismanic. She even had some pieces no longer available, or I would have ordered one, but she had made rings in the past with Moldavite encased in glass bubbles and kind of like sitting as the center of a little galaxy. They looked so cool. But yeah, I would love to talk with her and maybe see which pieces she's kept for herself and why, because as a jewelry maker, I think I've told you guys in previous videos, sometimes I make a piece, and as I'm making it, like every step of the way, right to the moment that the necklace is completed, my plan is I'm gonna sell it. But when it's finally all together, I just can't bring myself to part with the piece. And that's where my personal collection comes from, my little guilty stash of, I was gonna sell this, but I have to keep it. Like this bracelet I'm wearing here, these ametrine beads. You can tell I made this like 6 or 7 years ago because the gold plating has worn off. Some people really hate that. Some people, when a gold plated piece of jewelry tarnishes or the gold loses its luster, they just set it in the discard bin and stop wearing it. For me, I just find it adds something. Like I considered at one point remaking this, just changing out the clasp and changing the spacer beads to more shiny ones. But I just love it. I think there's something, a piece becomes your own when you interact with it and it changes and it transforms. Anyhow, yeah, that's about everything I had to say about the new series I'm planning. Oh, one more thing I want to say about it. The very day I first conceived this idea of doing a playlist about talismanic jewelry, one of my wonderful customers, he's ordered a few custom pieces, malas and necklaces. You might remember I did a sculptural Kali necklace a while ago where she's standing on top of a black tourmaline. I know I wore it in one of my videos. He bought that necklace. He sent me a message on Instagram saying, hey, random idea here, but if you ever want to interview people about their jewelry, I would love to talk about experiences with the jewelry I bought from you. So that's to me the proof that existence is aligning in such a way. Our guides are pulling strings behind the scenes, bringing the right contacts at the right time for the right reason. Like the moment I think I need to do a playlist about jewelry, I've already got my friend Satya Dev reaching out saying, hey, like I would love to come on your channel and talk about the jewelry I've bought from you. So yeah, that's going to happen too. It's not just going to be designers, it will also be collectors and what draws them to a certain piece and how they feel when they wear it. In any case, let me get to the stuff I have laid out here and why I've picked these as my show and tell of the day. The first necklace I want to share with you, I call this piece Spirit of the Stone. And I just love how this face turned out. I sculpted it using a vegan-friendly polymer clay and surrounded it in these little hand-sculpted golden rocks, also made out of that same clay. It's very similar to a series I did last spring that I call the Floating Rock Garden Collection. And I call it that because these piles of stones, like when you're holding it up, even the ones on the bottom are staying in place. And to me, that just feels a little magical. They're floating rocks. But yeah, I put this ancient looking face on the other side of a piece of fire agate. And I wish the camera would do this stone justice. It has just such an incredible inner fire, especially when the stone is wet. I should have put a little dish of water next to me here so I could kind of dampen it to show you. Maybe that little bit of hand lotion on my thumb is doing the trick. But see how there's almost an opalescent or an ammonite-like fire that flashes from this beauty. Anyhow, I crowned it with Moldavite and black tektite and then beaded the necklace to go with it using a combination of these little faceted sunstones and hand-napped moss agate, and then finally at the end I put some serpentine. To me, this necklace is a good example of the kind of piece that will transform when you wear it, especially if you use this unpolished slab of fire agate on the back as a worry stone, because every time you rub it, the oils in your hands and the friction caused by rubbing will slowly in time polish that rock. A lot of people will carry worry stones in their pockets so that when they're feeling anxious or nervous, they've got something to play with. If you start out with a flat, unpolished worry stone, over years of manipulating it in your hands, you'll wear grooves into it. You'll alter the very shape of that stone. It becomes a part of you. And I designed that talisman to work in that way, that the more you play with it, the better it becomes. Have you heard of this Ringing Cedars book series? It's a Russian author. I don't know whether it's fiction or fantasy or reality. I read one of these books years ago when I was still living in Vancouver. One of my coworkers brought it for me. And the author describes these cedar trees that have a mystical power to them, and people who are attuned to the energy will hear them ringing as a sign that they're ready. And if you take the wood, I'm hoping from fallen branches. I don't think they would actually chop down such sacred trees. But they would polish the wood into pendants and beads for people to carry as talismans. And it was described in that book that when they would rub the wood from these cedar trees, over time, the oils of their hands would polish that wood and reveal in it an appearance just like a polished gemstone. I'm guessing it would probably wind up looking like petrified wood, where, you know, the natural colors of the different particles making it up just shine through. But I think that worry stones work in much the same way. Anyhow, another talisman I wanted to share is this one here. I took the biggest Moldavite bead that I had and paired it with amethyst, one of these artisan made beads from India, black tektite, prehnite, and Herkimer diamond. And for me, this is one of the most magical stone combinations because the extremely high frequency energy of Moldavite is nicely grounded and centered and made more palatable by the soothing and psychic protection energy of black tektite. You'll see if you go to my Etsy shop, I've got a lot of Moldavite and tektite pieces together. And that's why, because both of these beautiful extraterrestrial impact glasses come from meteorite strikes, but the energies of the two are just so complementary to each other. The way the Moldavite elevates your frequency and creates such a powerful ability to tune into other dimensions of reality and contact with other beings we don't normally perceive. Sometimes that can be overwhelming. So combining it with black tektite, which is a little bit more grounding and comforting and protective, can make that transformative Moldavite journey a little bit easier. One of my customers, in my very last video, I wore a necklace that I had made that I designed it to be like a lariat necklace. So instead of a clasp, it comes together at any length you choose, made with Moldavite and Herkimer diamond and copper wire. I knew it was a powerful piece because as I filmed that video, I found myself giddy and I was talking a mile a minute. I was hyper. It's funny, somebody commented in that I must be drunk or on drugs because a stone won't make a person feel that way. Oh, that's the kind of person I think of as being like a muggle in Harry Potter. Like, okay, if you don't think stones will affect people's energy, dude, why are you even watching my channel? Because that's the whole reason I make stuff out of stones, is for the joy of spiritual energy that I feel in them. But anyway, I knew it was a powerful piece. I should have written out a warning to the man who bought it because, you know, if you go into a crystal shop, a lot of the time if you ask for Moldavite, the people working in the crystal store will warn you and say, are you sure you're ready for it? Are you aware of the fact that it can cause symptoms called Moldavite drunkenness? How's your heart? It can increase heart rate. They'll give you a warning with that stone. And I just assumed, like he had mentioned, he saw my videos. So, I mean, that's enough. I gave enough of a warning in there. But he sent me a message in Etsy describing this incredible out-of-body experience he had because the day he got the necklace, he decided to sleep with it. And guys, like if you get some Moldavite for the very first time and you decide to sleep with it, just expect something amazing to happen. In fact, I'm not going to share his experience because I didn't get his go-ahead to talk about it. That's also why I'm not naming names here. But I'll ask him if he's comfortable with it, if I tell people what happened to him when he slept with that Moldavite and Herkimer diamond. And if I get the go-ahead, I'll mention it in the next video. But anyhow, my advice was, if overwhelming dreams or spiritual encounters or out-of-body experiences happen, then pair the Moldavite with some black tektite. because black tektite has a property of creating like a psychic shield around you so that only the experiences you're comfortable with will filter through, as opposed to Moldavite by itself, which is kind of like the tough love crystal healing energy, where whether you think you're ready for this or not, you are going to meet some extraterrestrials and fly out of your body and see the earth from above and dissociate from the limitations of the human identity you believe yourself to be, and instead introduce yourself to yourself as the galactic super entity beyond time and space that you really are. Like, Moldavite will take you to that level if you let it. Now, I'm not saying that wearing black tektite with the Moldavite will slow down your progress or stop you from having these profound mystical awakenings. It's more that you will be eased into those profound mystical awakenings step by step at a rate that you're comfortable with. It won't be just slap, now you're on a roller coaster, I hope you're strapped in. It'll be more like, okay, now buckle your seatbelt. Okay, we're going to lift you up a little bit. Don't worry, you're safe, but this is going to be pretty fast. Like, it makes it palatable. Anyhow, I really love this talisman just because it combines all of these different high frequency stones. Amethyst, which activates the crown chakra, helping you connect with your ability to channel and to intuit divine wisdom and access the ideas that are going to be the most profound for your life. And of course, prehnite is an extraterrestrial awakening stone too. I remember reading about it years ago in the Book of Stones, and Robert Simmons and Naisha Ashian described it as a stone to wear if you want to meet extraterrestrials. And of course, that piqued my interest. That was always something that has fascinated me. So for me, it's a no-brainer to combine prehnite with Moldavite and tektite, because all three stones have a similar benefit as far as opening yourself to be a little bit more fearless in the face of the unknown. And then a little Herkimer diamond on top, just to amplify the energy of those other stones. I should speed things up a bit because I realized I'm taking so long talking about each piece I might not get to my drawing, but I really want to do some drawing in this video too. Anyhow, this guy is another one of my favorites. I think of it as ancient wisdom personified in a miniature stone. Like the way I put this ammonite sitting on this pile of hand-sculpted rocks, to me it represents a megalith. Like the gigantic stone monuments you'd see in places like Göbekli Tepe and Stonehenge, where the ancients had this technique of installing gigantic megalithic stone structures in a way that they interact with the environment and obviously connect with energies beyond what we now give them credit for, because we just don't know what the ancients knew. So I think of this as my ancient wisdom talisman, because as I made it, especially like as I created the rock garden here with this gorgeous smoky quartz cluster and some ancient amber beads, which are, of course, like amber is the fossilized resin from millions of years ago trees. So that just connects us to our ancient prehistoric ancestors. And then the ammonite. I always get those two mixed up, but this is ammonite, the fossil, also connects to those ancient times. As I put the pendant together, I started having these interesting psychic glimpses of just places around the world that have monolithic standing stones. And there's a place in the US, I forget what it's called, I've never been there, it's on my bucket list, where there's an earthwork set in the form of serpent mounds. It might even be called Serpent Mound. And part of the geo works there is that the ancients had laid out a spiral of stones. And so as I made, like, each of these little pieces is sculpted with clay and then dusted with mica powder. As I was putting them together, I just had this glimpse of being somebody manipulating the environment in ancient times, just laying stones in concentric circles and in spirals on the ground, and feeling like the force of nature and being a part of that force instead of being an observer of that force. In these technological times we're living in, where we're more likely to watch a video of a sunset than go sit on a hill and watch the sun set, we sometimes feel voyeuristic about nature. Like, we'll Google about gardening, or we'll watch videos of people going on hikes, but we're not a part of that world anymore. We're living in concrete jungles and apartments and houses built by people we don't even know, compared to the ancient way of living in wattle and daub architecture, where a person wove the thatch for their own hut or built the stilts for their own house. It's interesting. I feel that when we sit down and meditate on our ancestors, we reawaken the fact that that's still a part of who we are. That your great, 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 great times 1,000 grandmother and grandfather once lived in the land as part of the land. By nature of the fact that you come from a lineage of people who once did that, it's still within you. And I think that's why we feel emotionally and psychically reset when we go outside and gaze at the stars at night, when we walk barefoot in a garden and feel that dirt between our toes, or when we bathe in a river or at the beach. It rekindles that inner passion and gratitude for the world that gave us birth. So yeah, for me, this piece was a really mystical experience making it, because I sometimes fall into the trap a lot of us fall into when we get into spiritual healing, crystal healing, where I'm so drawn to the space energies, to the Moldavite, to the Herkimer diamond, to the amethyst, to the quote-unquote higher chakras, that I ignore the lower chakras, the root, the grounding, the primal force, the physical vitality. Because to me, my personality type, I'm more drawn to the ephemeral than the physical. And so while making this and contemplating these ancient works and the megaliths and the monoliths, it really brought home for me just how sacred the experience of connecting with nature is. And you might be saying, like, duh, Sarah, like, I could have told you that, but there's a difference between knowing it and experiencing it and feeling it. So for me, this piece really helped me feel and experience that joy of being in nature. And then, of course, I beaded the necklace with tektite and lava rock and Turritilla fossil agate, which is a form of agate that has teeny tiny little, this bead is my favorite. Just look at the little shells in it. Those are all little tiny, millions of years old, fossilized seashells. And I love them. I should mention I was so inspired by nature that if you go to my Instagram page, you'll see that I brought this necklace with me on a road trip to the Rocky Mountains. And I found a spot where the spring melt has already started, where Waterton Lake has been melting a little bit. And I dipped that into the water. And that water is pure, fresh mountain water. Like, it is crisp, clean. It's like nature in the form of water. And I wish now that I had brought all the jewelry I've made to dip into Waterton Lake, because to me that's kind of like a cleansing and a blessing and an energizing all wrapped into one. But I've got so many hundreds of pieces I've made now that it wouldn't be physically possible. unless I was spending like a week in the mountains, which, I mean, talk about bucket lists. Like, one day I'm sure I'll do that. But as of now, I brought the piece that I felt could most carry that frequency. There's something about fire agate that really holds the energy of nature. Anyhow, moving on. This piece, I was very tempted to keep it for myself when I finished it, but instead I was a good girl and decided, no, I'm going to list it because I need to make some of these incredible pieces available for other people who might want to collect them, who don't have the luxury of just making them the way I do. So I made myself something similar. But I fell in love with this piece, with the color play between that bright green serpentine, the heavy Indian gold, this beautiful minty fluorite, and then the big chunky amethysts. There's a really cool cacoxenite inclusion in this amethyst point here that I really loved. As a crystal person, when I find pieces like that, like the cacoxenite inclusions in amethyst, I'm such a stone hoarder that I'll sometimes set them aside and decide, okay, no, this one's not going into the shop. This one's going into my personal collection. But no, I just felt inspired to use some of those pieces for the shop. And I just knew that they had to go with this. Another megalith-inspired piece where there's this huge rainbow fluorite obelisk. I wish the light was behind it. I think I've got my jeweler's loop here, so I'm going to show you how gorgeous it looks when it's backlit by turning the little light on this. Just look at the gorgeous color in this stone. How it goes like waves of purple and teal and green and blue. Love it. And then that little clear quartz, which is a natural point that's not faceted by a person. That's how Mother Nature made it. And then a beautiful little blue kyanite. I think this piece, it's the kind of piece that if you wear it, everyone will be staring at your necklace and admiring it. That's right, Oreo. Kitty's trying to grab it. But yeah, that's one that I'm quite proud of. And then of course I've still been making more with Moldavite because that is my all-time favorite. This little guy with the really cool, it reminds me of a disco ball, the way this amethyst is faceted, with Moldavite and a mini Herkimer. And then last but certainly not least, I did this wire wrapped Moldavite, and I don't usually do wire wrapping. I'm very amateurish when it comes to my wire working skills because it's not something that I've really put the time into developing a skill for. But I bought this Moldavite piece from a collector who I found in a Moldavite collectors group on Facebook. That the admins of the group are geologists, and it's a very it's a very legit, highly accredited group. They only have the real stuff. And the admin from that group posted a link to this guy's collection who was selling off his collection pieces and says this is certified genuine Moldavite. And I don't have a huge budget for acquiring pieces, but when I saw this one here, I knew that I had to make it into a pendant. I had a vision for this. The Moldavite itself, you can see better on the back, it's this yoni shape, which to me just, that is the Divine Mother. That's the shape of birth. It's the shape of our origin. And I knew I had to make a piece dedicated to the Divine Mother, which this one is, using this sacred Moldavite. In my last video about Moldavite, I mentioned that I was so awestruck when I found out that the Venus of Willendorf, that ancient statue of a goddess that was found It's at the beginning of almost every art history book you'll ever get, especially if the art history book goes into prehistoric art. It's right there with the cave painting where people blew pigment over their handprints and painted animals. The Venus of Willendorf, it's this voluptuous, Rubenesque sort of a woman's figure, and her head is just a cluster of little balls in concentric rings. And to me, I suddenly had this aha moment when I read that Moldavite was also found in the same cave burial site as the Venus of Willendorf. That, of course, those are little eyeballs. She was an enlightened being. She could see in every direction simultaneously, and that's why her head was made of all these little balls. So I put a bunch of little balls on this Moldavite. They're gold filled, 14 karat gold filled, which means they won't rub away like the gold plating on this gold plated stuff did. It's meant to last a lifetime. And I added this beautiful, larger Herkimer quartz drop and some teeny tiny little Herkimers on the side. I think this side is my favorite. I love how it came out. It's a symbol of the DNA double helix, and a figure 8, like the infinity symbol, the way the two statement wires kind of loop together. And then on the other side, I did a stone for each of the 7 major chakras: amethyst, iolite, blue apatite, watermelon tourmaline, which I love. If you see it from the angle, there's just that little bit of pink inside the green border. A yellow precious opal, sunstone, and garnet. So it helps align all of the chakras. All the metal is 14 karat gold filled, so it's a really high-end metal piece. And I'll just shine the light behind it so you can see just how gorgeous that stone is. Like all the veining, all the bubbles. The natural edges of this Moldavite are just something I find magical. And see that watermelon tourmaline with the light behind it? Such pretty colors. I wonder if I can even use this jeweler's loop with the camera so you can see. It might not be able to focus on it properly. Oh yeah, it can. Yeah, this is one of the ways you can tell genuine Moldavite is when you look at it magnified. The modeled surface is something that they can't replicate when they're making the fakes. With the fakes, you can kind of tell that the texture is chipped out. But when you look at the real stuff like this, magnified, you can see how there's little frosted bits that came from millions of years of being in the ground. And sometimes you can even see the tiny, tiny little bubbles that formed within it. This is totally spontaneous. I wasn't planning to do a close-up. This is the other side of the stone. The tektite, I should say, not stone. But yeah, I just love seeing how it flew through the atmosphere and landed. That's hilarious. Look in the very center of the jeweler's loop. You see that big round shape? There's almost like right in there. There's almost a Venus of Willendorf shape within this Moldavite, and that's just such a cool synchronicity since I was just talking about that. Anyhow, I could spend a whole video just looking at Moldavite, and it would be fun for me, possibly boring for you, and it would be a failure to revive my draw with me style videos. So on that note, I'm going to continue with the drawing I started in my last draw with me video. I left it unfinished. I was going to go back to it in the ensuing weeks just on my own time, but I didn't, so I'm doing it now. But yeah, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who went to my Etsy shop and bought a little piece of Moldavite since my last video on Moldavite. I was overwhelmed with sales, and that was such a good thing because COVID-19 really badly impacted my Etsy shop. I think I've told you this in previous videos. But yeah, when there's an economic downtime, the first thing people stop buying are the luxury items that are not necessities. Jewelry being, of course, the top of that list. And I know the travel industry, like people who run Airbnbs, people who drive for Uber, I'm sure, of course, the restaurant industry, like anybody who serves people as a profession, have been really badly hit by the lockdowns. And yeah, I wouldn't have guessed before this pandemic that my shop was as unstable as it actually is. That, yeah, the economy, it's not just something they talk about on the news and I ignore it because it's boring. Like, it's something that directly impacts my life and my livelihood. So, yet my sales were way down in 2020 compared to what they were in 2019. And within Etsy, like, there's a stats screen that Etsy sellers can look at that tells you how your sales are this year compared to this same time last year. And I just stopped looking at it in 2020 because it was depressing to see, like, you're down 80% versus this same period last year. And it can be a really sad thing when you're self-employed and you're excited about what you're doing and you put love and time and energy and excitement into every piece that you make, and suddenly people aren't buying it anymore, even though they used to. It can make you really question yourself. But I had the presence of mind to know it's not personal, it's economic, and that if people are forced to stay home and they can't go to work, they can't earn their money, they're not getting stimulus checks equivalent of what they're losing. And like, if your stimulus check is $1,400 and your rent is $1,200, that only leaves you $200 to live on, which is not much. But anyhow, I was pleasantly surprised when I made my last video about Moldavite, and boy, I think I had 18 orders that week, which is unheard of in my Etsy shop post-pandemic. So yeah, I felt really, really grateful to everyone who went there and helped support me. Yeah, support my shop, support my lifestyle, support my dream, which is something that, like I said, I'm very grateful and blessed to be living, which is to be self-employed and to do what I love and to pay my rent doing what I love. And yeah, like I was saying earlier in the video when I was talking about talismans, the reason I always include a free gift with every purchase, like even when people don't mention my YouTube channel, I always include a free gift. Last month in February, it was a piece of amethyst because amethyst is the birthstone for the month of February. This month, March, it's aquamarine, one of my all-time favorites. I'm wearing a little bit of aquamarine, this bracelet here, because that is the gemstone of this month. And no, for those who are wondering, April's free gift with purchase will not be a diamond because I'm not that rich yet. But if I ever won the lottery, I've had these little fantasies which are ridiculously silly because I don't buy lottery tickets, but I think we all do this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we all do this. We'll think about what we would buy if we ever won the jackpot. And I've always thought, if I won $1 million And I no longer relied on my Etsy sales to live on. Like if I just had it as a fun project, not, if I didn't need the money, if I was doing it just because I love it, I would include like 5 free gifts with every order. Like if somebody bought a $5 pendant, I would send them their $5 pendant plus 5 more. And I think that, like, some of us are just like that. We're givers. They always say it's better to give than to receive. And I feel that way. And it's partly self-serving. It's partly also like giving is receiving, because when people get super excited and say thank you and let you know how much the thing that you've made means to them, it's an ego boost. Like, for sure. It's not like it's a selfless thing where, I'm giving and there's no selfish motive behind it. Like, in my case, the selfish motive behind it is that I love to know that something I've done has made somebody else's life a little bit better. And I think back to when I was a little kid. My grandparents were world travelers. Every year they would go on some major trip. Tunisia, Egypt, Australia, an Antarctic cruise where they actually went to the South Pole, Jerusalem, a river cruise of Europe. Sadly, my granddad actually passed away in Budapest on their last major trip. They were on a river cruise in Europe, and he had a massive stroke and died, which was heartbreaking for me. Didn't mean to go into a downer note there, but yeah, my grandparents, throughout my life, they've always been travelers. And I would always get so excited because they'd always bring me back a little piece of jewelry as a souvenir. And I would imagine what it was like to be in those places in the world based on the little jewelry pieces they'd bring. Like woven bracelets from Peru, and they would tell me about the street vendors who were sitting there on the sidewalk, weaving the strings. They looked like what we would call friendship bracelets. But I would get to kind of experience that place by touching those objects. That's probably part of where my love for jewelry and love for having a story behind it comes from, are those souvenirs they brought. When I was living in Vancouver, when I first started making jewelry, I was still going to the Emily Carr Institute of Art. I guess it's called the Emily Carr University of Art now. And the school was on Granville Island, which is like a really touristy part of Vancouver. And it's full of art studios and specialty shops. There's a public market there. It's a really gorgeous place to explore. I had moved to Vancouver to go to art school, and to my surprise, instead of pursuing art, I found myself more drawn into the gemstones at a store called the Crystal Arc, which was just a couple blocks away from my school. And the first time I walked into the Crystal Arc, I just felt the crystal energy. Like it hit me in such a good way that it was like a rush of positive energy. And it was love at first sight. Like they had a huge amethyst geode by the door, kind of standing like a guard. And I stood gazing at that amethyst. I kind of had this weird visualization of going into the amethyst. It wasn't big enough that you could step into or sit in like a crystal cave. But even still, like, I could see myself shrinking down, or like the amethyst growing and expanding, and I could just feel what it would be like to go into that amethyst cave. And I started going to the Crystal Arc every day. It's no exaggeration to say I would go in there at least once every single day, between my classes or after my classes on days when school let out earlier. And I would buy these little pouches. They sold by the weight. You could take like a little velvet pouch and fill it with polished stones like clear quartz, amethyst, rose quartz, sodalite, tiger's eye. I'll sound like Bubba on Forrest Gump when he names all the different kinds of shrimp. I'll name all the kinds of stones you could buy. But I would fill those little pouches. Go vegan, by the way. Don't actually eat shrimp. Eat the vegan versions. Have to say that. But I would fill these little pouches with crystals and take them with me everywhere, so that if ever I was talking to somebody and they said, you know, I just wish I could find love, I could give them a rose quartz. Or if somebody said, I just wish I could meditate, I would give them an amethyst. And that was something I loved doing. I remember one of my classmates, Emily Carr, saying that she just couldn't believe that I carried around these stones with me to just give people. And she said, and what do you get out of it? Like, it's not like everyone you give a stone to is going to give you something back or pay you for it. And I said, just knowing that this piece that they wouldn't have necessarily come by otherwise has come through me to reach them makes me feel blessed. In fact, one of my customers who orders a lot of custom necklaces, he's ordered some really cool pieces, sent me a message in Etsy to thank me for all the extras I included with his last order. He ordered a very high-end necklace, like a super long, lots of different gemstones. It took me a couple months to make it because I had to special order the beads. So I included like a couple freebies with it. And he sent me back a message and said something along the lines of, you know, when you bless somebody else with something, the universe blesses you. And I suddenly had this thought of, oh my goodness, like it really truly does. There was a day last year when I received a package from the lovely Deb. Hi Deb, if you're watching this video. And she sent me a package of gemstones that she had inherited and jewelry pieces. Like I wear this ring fairly often. There's some jewelry she included that I wear on a regular basis now. But a package just full of gemstones. And I couldn't believe how blessed I was to get so many precious stones. Some of them are really, truly like dream stones for me. Stones I've always wanted, like big emeralds, like large, I think 1 or 2 carats, in princess cut, which is my all-time favorite cut for gemstones, that beautiful square cut. There was a gorgeous trillion tanzanite, a lovely oval-shaped Paraiba tourmaline. And yeah, I remember at the time, I brought them over to my mom's house to show her and said, like, can you believe how blessed I am? Like, look at what she just sent me, just as a gift, just because. And my mom said, well, how many sales have you had since you opened your Etsy shop? And I looked, and it had been about 1,500 since 2014, which is quite modest for a shop that's been open that long. And she said, well, that means that you've sent 1,500 gifts to people because you send a gift with every order. So yeah, it's your good karma. It's coming back to you. And I'm not saying you do stuff so that you get stuff. Because like I said, for me, the selfish motivation behind sending a freebie is that it makes me feel good. Like, I feel good making somebody else happy by sending a little something extra. It's just beautiful the way the universe works, the way existence works, where I might send a free gift with an order and not know why I feel like including a specific stone to a specific customer, but I just feel like, you know what, I need to send this person this gem. And similarly, like, Deb didn't know that I had been dreaming of a Paraiba tourmaline and someday getting one. She didn't know that that was like my wish list, top of my wish list of stones. When she sent that to me, she just felt like she wanted to share her collection of gems with me. And I think it's really cool how existence will work through each of us at different times to get messages or gifts to others. And we don't know at the time that we're doing it what the gift is or why it's so significant, but it is. Just yesterday, I sent a message to a friend of mine who I haven't spoken to in a few months. Like, it's been a while. Like I mentioned, I'm a little bit more of a reclusive type. I like my personal space. I like to be on my own, doing my own thing. But I just suddenly had, felt like reaching out to this friend. And he replied back saying the timing couldn't have been better, that he had been so busy for 2 months that if I had sent him a text even the day before, he wouldn't have even been able to open it. But he had just finished moving, just settled into his new place, just unpacked, like just finally had settled, and then got a message from me. And when I said, like, how cool is that like, it's not like I did that deliberately. I just, haven't really thought to send a message until just then. And he said he believes that we have guides working with us, and we don't know when we're doing something, why we're doing it, but we've been guided to do just the right thing at just the right time. And that's just how it works out. And when he said that, it really resonated with me that, yeah, I don't talk about spirit guides or get into guides and angels and energies and channeling on this channel as much as I used to back in the days when I would talk about my Arcturian experiences or voices I've heard and things I've seen in meditations. And don't worry, for those who have been asking, I will get back into that. I'm just waiting for the right time. It's all got to be in the right cosmic timing, I believe. But yeah, it just made so much sense and resonated that, of course, like, even little things like calling a friend or reaching out to a relative, sometimes we don't even know, but we're doing it at the right time. My grandmom is amazing when it comes to stuff like that. Like, I visit with her every Sunday, and I feel so lucky to live in the same city as my grandmom again. And last Sunday, she was telling me and my mom about some phone calls that she had made. She had sent Christmas cards this year to all of her friends and relatives, which she does every year. And one of the cards came back as incomplete address. So she called that friend just to find out what is the correct address so that she could resend that Christmas card. And she said that that friend was so touched. They talked for like an hour, and she said afterwards she realized if that Christmas card had just reached the friend, they wouldn't have rekindled that connection the way that they did when she had to call and check the address. And like this is just an ordinary thing, right? Like, it's the kind of thing that happens to all of us. But when I start thinking about these things in a spiritual perspective, it just shows that there are reasons for things that happen, like even things that we find annoying, a waste of a stamp, an incorrect address. But look at how beautifully that led to a great conversation. And she said that lady had told her, I needed this. Like, thank you so much for calling me. This means so much. I really needed this. It's great to have to get to talk to you. And especially because, spoiler, or not spoiler, this isn't a movie or anything, it's my grandma's life, but I buried the lead, that's the phrase I'm looking for. The address was not incorrect. The Christmas card came back to her, marked incorrect address, but it was the correct address. So when she popped it back in the mail, it reached her, no problem, with the exact same address that had come back. And so it's like, yep, existence worked through the postal system in order to get those two ladies on the phone with each other. That's another benefit of wearing Moldavite, is that of all the gemstones that you can wear as spiritual talismans, Moldavite is the most renowned for sparking synchronicities. Because I think a lot of people have synchronicities on a regular basis, like finding themselves in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing, and something amazing happens. But if they're not paying attention or taking note, they'll hear stories from people like me or other YouTubers who like to share our synchronicities and talk about our spiritual experiences. And they'll think like, well, damn, I wish that kind of stuff happened to me. And it's not that it doesn't. It's just that you have to be in a space where you're paying attention to it in order to notice that it's happened. For me, that's also what intuition is all about. It's not that some people can interpret symbols and other people can't. It's that I think there's like a certain switch that can get flipped in our brains, that once it's flipped, things make sense to us. It's kind of like how some people are mathematical geniuses, and if they see an equation, they'll be able to quickly ascertain the answer. Whereas other people like me who are not mathematically gifted, equations look like gibberish, and it's just shocking that there's even a way to make sense of them. But I think similarly, things like interpreting tarot cards or interpreting the signs that we see in clouds or the formations in gemstones, for some of us it just clicks. And I think that it's not that some of us are special. Well, we are. Everyone's special. But I think it's that where we put our focus and our attention, that's what we'll develop. Those brilliant mathematicians are fascinated by math and love to explore it. I'm thinking of, I forget his name right now, but that brilliant Indian mathematician from Madras who had been a villager, not even going to school, and shoot, I wish I could remember his name right now, but he would sit in a Lakshmi temple every day and write down complicated math equations using chalk on the temple floor. And this Mahalakshmi would speak to him and show him the equations. The movie was called The Man Who Knew Infinity. He won a scholarship to Oxford, I believe. Was it Oxford? Yeah, it must have been. Chandra something. But yeah, for him, like, math was his passion. The study of numbers and making sense of the universe through mathematical equations. Just like for me, jewelry is my passion. Last Sunday, when I visited with my grandmom, I showed her, not this necklace, but the version very similar to this that I had made for myself. And she studied it for the longest time and looked at the way I had used the polymer clay to build a rock garden and to hold the gems in place. And after studying it for a while, she said to my mom, I would never think to do this. Like if somebody handed me these stones and that clay, and my grandmom, she's a crafter, a lifetime crafter. She makes her own clothes and she's brilliant as a seamstress and as a designer. She designs her own clothes. She made her own wedding dress. And it was gorgeous. But anyway, she said to my mom, like, if I was handed these materials, I would never have thought to make this. And yeah, and my mom said, well, that's because you don't regularly make jewelry or work with these kinds of stones. And she said, I'm sure that if Sarah had your sewing machine and your piles of fabrics and you know, your fashion influences, she wouldn't think to make the clothes you make. And it's totally true. I wouldn't be able to. So yeah, each of us, we develop the skills and the talents based on how we spend the most amount of time. I've been blown away by some of the posts you guys have been tagging me in on Instagram, where I've mentioned a long time ago I want to do a video showcasing viewer art because so many people tell me that these videos inspire them to start drawing. The reason I haven't done it yet was that I set the goal of 20, that when 20 people tag me in posts showing what they've drawn, that's when I'm going to do a viewer art video and show like a friendly critique, not a criticism critique like you get in art school where you have to say something good and something bad. I'll only say good things, don't worry. But doing a sort of a video critique of viewer art and just showing how many different ways you can do abstract drawing, or it doesn't have to be abstract, it could be representational too. But I've been blown away by some people who tag me in Instagram drawings, and at first glance I'll look at the piece and think, like I don't remember drawing that. And then it hits me, I didn't draw that. They've tagged me in it, but they drew it. My friend Marion, hi Marion if you're watching this video, she showed me some in WhatsApp, stuff that she's drawn based on my videos, and they just look so incredibly cool. I don't know how you have the patience for it, Marion, and this is something people say to me sometimes about the stuff I draw. They'll say they don't know how I have the patience for it, but what Marion did, she drew with me. Like, you know how I call these videos draw with me and we'll talk about, and then whatever my theme is for the day. What she was doing was actually drawing the same thing I was drawing, like kind of copying it, but in her own sketchbook. And the result was so incredible because it was the similar spirals and shapes and organic growth of the images, but with slightly different proportions and slightly different layout. And it's just so cool because when it comes to abstract like this, even if you draw the same thing 10 times, all 10 pictures will be slightly different. Or if 10 people draw the same thing, you'll get 10 completely unique compositions. I love seeing stuff like that. Oh, but where I was going with this is that I can show the same abstract image to different people, and everybody sees something different in it. Like right here, for example, I see a row of people with little soul star chakras above their heads, radiating out to existence. Somebody else might look at this and see like a zipper or statues in a lineup. Like everybody will see something different. And that's something really cool. And our interpretations, our opinions, our likes and dislikes, like it's all informed by our personal predisposition and all the experiences we've had in life. I'm very fascinated by people, I love to hear people. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I started listening to a new one called A Little Bit Culty, and it's by Sarah Edmondson, who was the very first public whistleblower of the Nexium cult. She wrote an article, they wrote an article about her in the New York Times about the scar that she got when she was branded with Keith Raniere's initials. I can really relate because of this Trishul I got tattooed because the fraud who calls himself Nityananda instructed me to. But at least in my case, the Trishul is a sacred symbol that represents the power of Shiva and of Kali. And it represents the trifold aspect of past, present, future, creation, maintenance, and destruction. Like, it's a positive symbol. So I don't hate the tattoo, even though I wouldn't have gotten it if a cult leader hadn't made me. My heart really goes out to the ladies who had been recruited into DOS and Nexium, and they got branded by a psychopath's initials. That's just horrific. But her podcast is a lot of fun to listen to. She interviews some fascinating people, and I just love hearing people's stories. What makes people tick? My friend Kelsey started her own podcast where, like, she interviewed me in one episode about talismans and jewelry, my favorite thing. And she mentioned in that interview that what inspired her to start the podcast was that she knows a lot of cool people, and they all have different stories and cool experiences, and that she just wanted to share all of those fascinating people with other people who are interested in interesting people. My God, thank goodness this isn't a drinking game where you have to take a shot every time I say people, because you'd have gotten drunk by now. But yeah, I love listening to Joe Rogan and Dakota of Earth and my friend Kelsey and other podcasts. And yeah, the playlist I'm thinking of doing, interviewing jewelry designers and jewelry collectors about their favorite talismans. It's also inspired by that, because I think a lot of times we'll look at somebody whose style we admire, whose jewelry we admire, and it looks good aesthetically, but we don't really know the actual reason we're drawn to the piece is the story behind it, the energy put into it, the creativity that it just exudes. And yeah, I'm really excited about this upcoming playlist. So if any of you know a jewelry designer or a jewelry artist who you'd like to see featured, like, hook me up, like, make the introduction, or let me know in a comment who you think should be featured, because I'm open to suggestions. And yeah, I would love to include my friend Alexandra. She has an Etsy shop called Enchanting Spirits, and she makes crystal talismans and natural stone jewelry as well. I think she got into it very near the same time I did. She had quite the crystal collection when I stayed with her in London a few years ago. 6 or 7 years ago now, I think. She's the one who I got to explore Stonehenge and Avebury with. She brilliantly planned that little trip. And yeah, she has some fascinating pieces in her shop, and she works with some stones I've never even heard of before, like Darwinite and impact glasses, besides just Moldavite and Tektite, that I would love to learn more about. So she's on my list. I haven't told her. She might be hearing it first in this video, but I'll send a private message if you're listening to this. And a girl, I found her YouTube channel fairly recently. Rachel St. May. It's all lowercase, the way she writes her channel name, so it looks like she's called Rachelist May, but it's Rachel St. May. she started making jewelry after working in a crystal shop, and she does really cool monthly videos about what pieces she wore and carried that month and why, and which stone energy she feels most drawn to at any given time. So she's also on my list of people I'd like to interview. But I would like to expand myself beyond just interviewing other crystal collectors and crystal connoisseurs, because I think it would be fun to profile, for example, people who make sculpted jewelry, maybe who do carving, who do maybe crystal cutting, who do metal smithing. There's another jewelry designer on my list. I follow her on Instagram. Her Instagram is called Bring Me My Battle Axe. And she does, what's the word for it? Not inlay work, but, oh boy, it's on the tip of my tongue. Where you make a picture using a little metal frame and then fill it in with colorful glass pigment and then fuse it together. As soon as I turn off the camera, I'm going to remember what it's called. But I'm not even going to bother worrying, because one of you is going to comment and say, oh, you mean blah, blah, blah. And yes, that's exactly what I mean. She does really cool pieces that are based on science fiction. Like, she'll have little alien abduction scenes done in her glass pieces. I want to say enameling. It might be enameling. That might be the word I'm looking for. But anyway, yeah, if you have a favorite jewelry designer, or if you know a jewelry designer or a jewelry collector who works with all kinds of fascinating talismans, please do let me know, because I would love to interview them, perhaps. Anyhow, on that note, as you can see, I stopped drawing a while ago because I reached the edges, and I drew so many details in so many places here that if I start drawing, I might smudge the ink, so I have to kind of let it dry before my next layer. But thank you for watching. I hope this has inspired you to get creative, whether that means drawing or making some jewelry perhaps, or going to my Etsy shop and ordering some jewelry. If you ever do that, by the way, mention that you watch my YouTube videos, because then I send a second free gift with purchase. Every order, I always ship a free gift. Like I said, this March I'm sending a free aquamarine pendant with every purchase. But if you mention that you watched my YouTube video, you get the aquamarine plus another goodie. So be sure to mention that. And yeah, if you've done any drawings inspired by watching my videos, please do tag me on Instagram if you post them, because I would love to see your art, and jewelry too, for that matter. If you're making jewelry, share it with me. I'm curious, I'm passionate about it, I would love to see it. And if last thing, if you have started working with Moldavite at any point in time, not just after seeing my video, but if you've had any Moldavite experiences, please let me know what you experienced with Moldavite, because I would like to make that an ongoing theme on my channel, because it is my favorite of all crystals. Even though it's not a crystal, it's an impact glass by a meteorite strike. I call it a crystal just because that's easier. It's my all-time favorite. And so I would like to keep bringing it up, keep sharing stories, and hopefully that way, if I mention it at least once in every video, whoever wants to start experiencing Moldavite, maybe people are yearning for the transformation Moldavite brings, but they've never heard of Moldavite before. So I would love to constantly talk about it so that whoever is meant to find it will find it. So yeah, if you've got any cool experiences with Moldavite, please do share. And yeah, that could inspire other people to start working with that high frequency energy. On that note, thank you so much for watching this video. Much love to you always, and happy spring. Spring is almost here. I hope you're getting outside, enjoying the beauty of nature, connecting with those divine roots and the blessings of Mother Earth, as well as the blessings of the stars. Bye for now.